All right, welcome back to On the Ball, the video podcast series from the Vanderbilt Sports and Society Initiative. Really excited to have my good friend Yussuf Khan, the founder of firstandpen.com, on to talk about an issue that you've been writing about for many months, maybe over a year, but has really gotten a lot of national attention just this week. Assume that some folks watching this are familiar with the issue, some maybe not. So, Yussuf, what was the news coming out of the NAACP this week, for those who don't know, in relation to Black athletes and college athletics in the state of Florida?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me, Andrew. It's always great to talk to you. But this week on Monday, as a matter of fact, the NAACP issued a letter to NCAA institutions discussing not only the situation in Florida about anti-DEI efforts, the Anti-Woke Act, and a lot of the hostilities that Governor DeSantis is creating down there, but they also implored Black athletes to actually take a stand and either A, stand up to what he's doing, or B, actually don't go to the state or leave the state in order to play college athletics in particular. And it's a really interesting thing because it's something that I had written about, I believe it was last May or April. And, it's something that I think a lot of the Black athletes, they have so much power and so much opportunity to really hone in on this issue and do something about it, but they haven't unified yet. And I think now is the time to do that after all of these different obstacles and hurdles and really hostilities that DeSantis is creating in Florida.
Mhm. So tell us more about that. Like, what's happening in Florida that the NAACP is reacting to, and that they're not alone. Emmett Smith has come out with a statement. You've written columns about this. Um, for those who don't know, what's especially concerning right now?
Sure. So, it all started probably last January of 2023 at New College in Florida, which was a liberal arts college in Florida. And he basically issued a takeover of it and appointed 6 conservative board members to the board of trustees and came out with this idea that it was going through a bad period because of their ideology that they were instilling there through CRT and DEI and all these other things that were just completely, we know it's a lie. We know it's a complete lie. But it started there. And then it rolled on from there into February and March with all of these anti-woke initiatives. He attacked Disney. Then he went after African American history. So it was just a culmination of things that were rolling and rolling. And then in May of last year, the NAACP, or I think it was maybe a little later than that, NAACP issued a travel advisory for Black people traveling to Florida and said that it's a really hostile environment down there. And, all of these things now snowball into where we are right now, where he is using his power, he is using his privilege to just say, listen, we don't want, Black history. We don't want DEI because it creates divisiveness and it separates people. When in all honesty, as we all know, it doesn't do that at all. It's a very beneficial thing to not only colleges and institutions, but also the corporations, right? When you have more different or varying trains of thought, you can actually succeed a lot better when you have that. So it's an environment that he has created over the last maybe 2.5 years that now has spilled over to sports. And my whole position is that sports is very powerful. It has a lot of not just money, but the power it has and influence it wields. It needs to step into this arena now and do something about it in Florida.
Mhm. Yeah, I wanted to ask you more specifically about why college athletes are being asked to step up in this situation. Removing DEI program at universities and firing staff affects all students at that university. You could argue easily that it affects citizens of that state and businesses in that state. So why do you think that college athletes or even high school athletes who are being asked to, don't sign with a PWI public school in the state of Florida are being called on to step up in this moment versus other that are affected by this?
Yeah, and it's something I wrote about today in my story was they're in a sort of unfair position, right? Because they're being asked to now take a stand against something they didn't create. Obviously, this isn't something they created, but they're asked to take a stand against something which will directly affect them. It affects their history, it affects their family, it could affect their future earnings potential as well. But I think they're being tasked with this because right now through the legislative branch, we've seen it's just not going to work. Right there, it doesn't seem like I don't know if it's a lack of voting down there or a lack of interest. I don't know because obviously I'm not in Florida, but I think if we can take a different path and we can recruit student athletes to say, listen, stand up. There is precedent for this, right? We have seen examples where student athletes step up and change occurs. We saw this in Missouri in 2015 when students were protesting racial incidents there. Once the football team got involved, all of a sudden it became more of a national issue and change was affected where they actually removed the president and they started to install some different initiatives and rules in terms of addressing racial incidents. So there is precedent for student athletes to get involved and show what their power is and how they can affect change. And I think Florida is such a hotbed for sports on the high school level, the college level, the pro level. If these athletes can come together, particularly the Black athletes can come together, they can unite and use their collective, not only athletic talents, but their earnings talents as well. As you know, Andrew, as we know, financial money speaks volumes in many different ways. So if they can unite that way, they can use their collaborative power to affect change. Could you imagine if Emmett didn't go to Florida and instead he went to someplace like the University of Michigan or, somewhere like BC or something like that, what that would have done to the school, right? How many seats it would have left empty. So that's the power that I think they have to affect change, is to say, listen, if we don't play at Florida, Florida State, University of Central Florida, Miami, then you know what? You're going to get hit financially. So we need to affect change that way.
Mhm. And so I guess this is really sort of two fronts. On the one hand, if great Black players don't play for these schools, then the teams won't be as good, and nothing motivates football fans more than losing, right? So maybe they would call for some sort of change to affect recruiting. On the other hand, and I think the Emmett Smith and the NAACP have pointed this out in their statements, that the experience of being at these universities is not as supportive if these DEI programs are taken away. So not only, is there the impact on maybe white fans who see their teams not succeeding, but the real practical impact of being a Black student at these universities where DEI has been removed, right?
Yeah, it's as we learned today, when University of Florida eliminated their DEI program, they basically fired almost 30 people. That's just on Florida's campus. Then they had external contracts with vendors off campus. So you're talking about maybe, upwards of 50 or 60 people who were directly impacted by this rule or this anti-DEI bill. And what happens is it doesn't just stop there, right? Then it trickles down to the athletes because, you know, it's really interesting, Andrew. I've been trying to formulate this. Now that Dartmouth, for example, the college basketball players, right? The men's basketball players have been allowed to unionize. Okay. Imagine if that happens in other states, and it just might happen, right? But then what happens when Black students all of a sudden they say, you know what? We want to unionize as a football labor, the Black, football players at the University of Florida. Since they're considered employees, does something happen to them on an anti-DEI effort, right? It could happen because we've never seen this before. This is all brand new. So I think the whole point is, if you can sort of stem the challenges now, if you can deal with the obstacles now, in the future, maybe you have a better opportunity to expand the options that you're trying to grow and take advantage of. But this anti-DEI effort, also what NAACP is calling a general anti-Blackness effort in Florida, it must be addressed by more than just voting.
Mhm. You see this as Florida obviously is in the news or as the target of what's being discussed right now. But and I noticed in the examples you've used about where Emmett Smith could have gone, Michigan, Boston College, you didn't say Alabama,
Mhm.
Clemson, Tennessee. I mean, this is a problem or an issue that's larger than Florida.
Yeah. Yeah, it
And you've
is.
written
I mean,
about that.
yeah, Texas, Tennessee, South Carolina, Arkansas. We see what started in Florida has now trickled out to other states in the South and in the Midwest. And in Utah, we've seen it now in Utah, in Idaho. So it's trickling out to red states. And it's really becoming a bigger issue that, I've said many, many times that sports can really address this because sports has the power outside of the voting booth to force change. And not just superficial change, but real change. Again, we've seen great examples in the past. We've seen anywhere from Kurt Flood, Muhammad Ali, Jackie Robinson, WNBA players forcing a sale of the Atlanta Dream, right? That is power. And I think if these student athletes can look at these examples and realize, hey, it's been done before. There is precedent, there is procedure we can follow to make sure that this is done properly. It can work. And now you've got Emmitt Smith, who is arguably the biggest athlete in all of Florida football history, if not sports history, right? In the state, he's coming out and saying, I'm here. We got to do something about this. So now you've got somebody with real power that they can, go behind and leverage his influence to make some change. And hopefully that trickles out to the other states like Texas, like Arkansas, like Tennessee, et cetera.
Mhm. Now, of course, there are public universities in these red states
Yeah.
that are HBCUs.
Yeah.
Do you see this as an opportunity for HBCUs to, just like you saw Dion doing at Jackson State, to really elevate their programs in contrast to what's happening at the PWIs?
Yeah, what was really interesting about the NAACP's letter was that they said basically they, for black student athletes to bypass PWIs, but they also said don't bypass, HBCUs in Florida, right? They were clear about saying that, which I think was great. I think it's a great opportunity, but here's the other challenge they face is one, they have been severely underfunded. We have seen that in Tennessee and other states. But two, there could be a backlash against them, by speaking up and speaking out, or there could be a backlash by them just being black institutions. They could come for them on this whole anti-woke, anti-DEI initiative and say we shouldn't have black universities, right? We're going to eliminate them. That could be a possibility. I'm not saying it will be, but you know what? We didn't know this was going to happen to this extreme, so we don't know. HBCUs have a great opportunity right now. I think what Dion did was great. I'm not saying he was the person that did everything for HBCUs, but he did bring a special presence over his 2+ years at Jackson State. And here's another thing, Andrew. If you look at when Travis Hunter committed to Jackson State over Florida State, the backlash he received from just the sports industry alone, it was incredible. Why are you wasting your time at HBCU? Blah, 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 blah. And look at him now, right? He did so well at Jackson. He's now at Colorado. So I think there's an opportunity to HBCUs to take advantage, but there's also a risk. And I think they have to be willing to take that risk, just like black athletes take the risk and stand up, because if you're unified in doing it, change can be
Mhm.
created.
What do you see as the biggest hurdles to this actually being a realistic possibility of happening? On the one hand, like for recruits, it's a 17, 18-year-old kid being asked to make a pretty a significant decision for
Yeah.
maybe to play where their own family couldn't even see them if they go too far away. Or are you asking a star women's basketball player in South Carolina not to play for Dawn Staley? What do you see as the biggest roadblocks to this actually coming to fruition?
I think, it's a couple different challenges. I think one is obviously the financial aspect, right? A lot of students across all sports, not just football, but obviously football is the biggest one. There's financial challenges. Maybe their families don't have a lot of money, and football or basketball or other sports affords them the opportunity to play at a higher level, to possibly get to the professional level, to get an education. So there's a risk to their financial gains and rewards, right? If they take a stand. But I'll tell you this, and I think this is the most important thing. It's not they're not asking for individual people to do it, like one person here, one person here. No, it's got to be a unified effort. When some of these initiatives were being rolled out in Florida and some of the other states, to watch the high school students march out as a unified group, black, brown, white, it didn't matter. Everybody was marching out. That's power. If you do that as a collective group, you're not you're not as likely to get hit with some of the ramifications as hard, right? You might get hit with something, but as a group, it's much stronger. Could you imagine, Andrew, if the top 100, 4 and 5 star recruits all stood up and say, we're not going to Florida? Could you imagine that? I mean, that's power. That would make every athletic director and coach at Florida State, Miami, University of Central Florida say, hey, wait, whoa, whoa, whoa. We're losing 100 potential 4 and 5 star recruits. We can't do that. So that's where the power is. It has to be collective. It cannot be just one or two people doing it.
With that possibility on the horizon, what do you think the stance or the role or the actions, of the SEC or the NCAA should be at this moment where they have a state that's, a part of their membership, or multiple states? Should they be involved in reacting to different legislation that's passed in all 50 states? What makes this worthy of stepping up at this time?
Yeah, should they be involved? Yes. Will they? Probably not. I mean, Greg Sankey at the SEC, right? One of the top two conferences in the country. They have a new deal with ESPN. They're going to be exclusive with ESPN starting this fall for football and basketball. They were interviewing him about, for example, the lack of black coaches in the SEC right now in college football. We saw Auburn with Alan Green a couple years ago. He was the only black AD at the time. Obviously, we know who's at Vanderbilt, but there are issues there in the coaching front as well as in the athletic department area. And Greg Sankey had addressed it. But here's another problem. By saying we're looking for, talented black or women or whatever the case might be, suppose the backlash is, well, this is DEI again. Here's the ideology popping up again, and now it's infiltrating our coaches and our athletic department decisions, right? This could be a problem for the SEC. So I think if the SEC stood up and made a bold statement, if Greg Sankey and his department said, listen, we are committed to DEI, that to me is an incredible opportunity to work with the NAACP and really force some change in states like Florida, where the SEC has a huge presence.
Mm-hmm. And you pointed out in one of your columns, there are examples of the NCAA refusing to play championships in certain states, and not just for show, but we're successful in changing legislation or changing practices in certain states, right?
Yeah, North Carolina, when they had the whole I forgot the exact title of the bill, but it was the
The
almost
bathroom bill.
yeah, the bathroom bill was almost like a precursor to the Don't Say Gay bill that Florida passed, right? And who stepped up for that? Not only the NCAA, but NBA. Both of them stepped up and said, we're not playing there, right? So you got to figure out what you're going to do. And they ended up rescinding the bill because they were like, oh, shoot, wait, that's a big economic impact we're about to lose. The NFL did it in 91 when they were, Arizona was looking to bid on the Super Bowl. And they said, well, if you don't recognize Dr. Martin Luther King Day as a federal holiday, we're not bringing the Super Bowl to you. And they didn't. They passed Arizona. So the next year, Arizona had to pass the law to make it a federally recognized holiday. And a year later, they got the Super Bowl. So there are ways that sports have stepped in. We can even go to baseball. I remember Lou Moore wrote a great column for us about a year or two ago on how Hank Aaron did not want to go play in Atlanta when the Braves were looking to move from Milwaukee to Atlanta. And what happened? The business community ended up working with MLB to say, you got to get rid of Jim Crow down here in Atlanta before we move, because that will be a huge hit. So we see pro sports, we see colleges are stepping up or have stepped up. So again, the precedent is there, the blueprint is there. It's just a matter of unifying and following it, because it does work.
And you mentioned the Atlanta Dream earlier, and so we have seen professional athletes step up on these issues and have a real impact. Emmett Smith, a former pro athlete, has spoken out here. Do you see the Dolphins or the Heat, the Buccaneers? Is there an obligation of professional athletes who may even have a larger platform than some of these high school recruits or players, but they maybe have when they measure the calculus of, is it worth speaking out on, they have multi-million-dollar contracts, sponsors, what do you see as the obligation of pro athletes and the likelihood that they might join an effort like this?
Yeah. I think when it comes to pro, there's always the financial aspect that comes into play. We saw it with Colin Kaepernick, right? We saw what happened to him, and he got blackballed from the league, and all players see that, right? And everybody touches on it, but they don't really touch on it, right? They're like, oh, it's really bad what happened to Colin Kaepernick, but they won't take his side fully, right? There's always little bits and pieces they jump in on. I think it would be incredible that if one day, you know what, that you let's say the Dolphins and the Buccaneers, the black players and people who believe in it say, listen, we're not playing on Sunday. We're not. What would happen? You know, I don't know. I don't know what would happen. I don't know if contractually, if they do that, that if they would, you know, some punishment would be levied. But I tell you, the threat of doing it is what people really need to understand. That has power. I go back to University of Missouri, right? 2015, when the football teams threatened not to play, the athletic department realized we're about to lose $1 to $2 million from one Saturday, just not playing. And what happened? President ended up getting booted out. They got a new president and they enacted some new policies there. So if you can do that at a collegiate level, why can't you do it at a pro level? You know, that would affect the stadiums, the amount of money they make from parking and tickets and merchandise and all these other sales. If you lose one game, you know, they don't play one game at Tampa, one game in Miami. That's millions and millions of dollars. That's a television product. So now ESPN, local TV, NBC, all these teams are like, I mean, media companies like, wait, whoa, whoa, whoa. You can't let them do that, right? So now they step in. So I think that if the athletes come together and unite, cannot be one or two, it's got to be a united front, they can affect change that moves up, doesn't move down, it moves up. And once the media networks get involved, you know, they would be like, hey, we can't afford that's 20 something $1 million in ad revenue we lose. So if, and here's the other thing, Andrew, if you understand the business of sports and how these things work, you can actually create even more effective change because you affect the business operations of not one place, but multiple places.
Mhm. Yeah, well, this will be a fascinating issue to follow in the weeks ahead, and it's the type of thing that you write about, you have others write about on your site all the time. So for those who aren't familiar with First and Pen, can you tell us a little bit about, the genesis of this idea and what your site is intended to cover?
Sure. So I've been in sports media for about 25 years. And when I was at ESPN, one of the first things my colleague and I did back in 2003, we created a show called the ESPN Block Party. And it was really ESPN's first major attempt to integrate urban culture with sports. And it worked pretty well for 1 year. And I went on to do different things at different places. But I always believe that you need to have these different voices and stories and personalities, you know, integrated into mainstream sports. So I got that kind of started with the Shadow League when I ran it for 6.5 years. And I launched First and Pen about 3.5 years ago to tell stories through voices of color in sports, because many times these types of voices are not heard or don't want to be heard or don't have a place to be heard and be heard consistently. That's the biggest thing, is consistency. So I wanted to give a destination where these voices could be heard, particularly through professors of color. That is one instance that I think, you know, we're able to create a little bit more of change and difference than what traditional companies are doing and what other companies in my field are doing. So that's how the idea came about. Definitely check us out, First and Pen, FIRSTANDPEN.com, and across all social, it's the same thing, First and Pen.
And then I know you're also really interested in developing a pipeline of helping young professionals get started in their careers, or college students get started in their careers. And you're working on an event coming up in November. Tell us more about that.
So I partnered last year with a group called SBRnet, which is a sports data analytics company. And we hosted the first annual Get in the Game Sports Business Career Conference, which was designed to educate HBCU students and students of color about the sports business industry and the career pathways. Not only do I have my site, but I am also a professor in sports management at a few different universities. And one of the things I noticed is that students don't really understand the sports business industry. They don't understand how to get into it. They don't understand how to navigate. And more importantly, they don't understand the skill sets that are involved in each career pathway. They think, oh, I just want to make money. I want to go into sales. And then they realize, oh, shoot, I'm not a seller. I want to be on TV. oh, I'm not made for being in front of the camera. So we wanted to educate them about the skill sets necessary to pursue different career paths. So this year, November 8th through the 10th, it will be hosting the second annual Get in the Game Sports Business Career Conference. This year, we'll be back in Baltimore at the Hyatt Regency Inner Harbor. And we're excited. We're probably going to have close to 30 sponsors. Last year, we had 20. Last year, we had a little over 130 students representing 17 different colleges and universities. And I think this year we'll probably have 175 students, probably closer to 30 schools and universities. And feedback has been great, really excited about it. And, educating students about the industry that I have spent my majority of my career in is something I'm very passionate about. So we're excited to bring it back in November.
So if you're a student or a potential sponsor, you're interested in this, where can you get more information?
Sure. So you can go right to our website, getinthegameconference.net is the actual website. And we've got all of our different, information there. We're actually getting ready to post our 2024 information probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks, but we've got the recap video there. We've got the new location, which is the Hyatt Regency Inner Harbor. So there are some things that are up right now, but in a couple weeks, we'll have the agenda ready and the registration will be open probably later in the summer. But definitely check it out in the meantime, getinthegameconference.net.
All right, so we can tell in your voice that you're a New Yorker. So I'm forgetting, are you Giants or Jets and Yankees or Mets?
So I am a Steelers fan, diehard
Oh,
Steelers fan, but I'm a Mets fan and I always cheer for my local teams. No hate to the Yankees, no hate to the Yankees or the Jets or the Giants. I cheer for everyone local except when the Steelers play them. Then I'm
all
all black and yellow.
right. So what, you're getting Russell Wilson?
Yes, I'm very excited about that. I think people looked at, I've written about Russell, pretty extensively too. And I think people looked at his last 2 years at Denver and really came down hard on him. And last year, actually, he had actually a pretty good season. I think he had something like 25 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, threw for over 3,000 yards, which was almost the same as his last Pro Bowl year. I believe was 2020 when he was still at Seattle. So the similarities were there, but I'm excited to see him. I think he can be a great piece for us. I think he's still got a lot left in the tank. I know a lot of people hate on him, but listen, I think if we can get him to throw for 3,300 yards and 30 TDs, we can win an extra 3, 4 games. So I'm all for Russell coming on board.
All right. Well, I'm a Packers fan, so I won't mention a certain Super Bowl about 10 years ago or so.
We
But
don't talk about that. Yeah, we don't want to talk
yeah.
about Big Ben's 2 interceptions. I'm not going to bring that. But I will say this, you're a Packers fan. I think Josh Jacobs will be a great fit for you guys down there. Really great fit.
Yeah, hate to lose Aaron Jones, but
Yeah,
Jacobs is great, and I'm excited about Jordan Love. So
yeah.
yeah, good time to be a Packer fan.
And they look good against Dallas. I did not expect that performance against Dallas. I cheered it. I don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. I was like, yeah, go Packers. But that was a great performance. And I think, Jordan Love sitting for, a year or two, I think really helped him. He really reminds me of what the pathway that Steve McNair took, which was you sit
Hmm.
for 2 years, year three, you understand a little bit more. And this will be what year 3 or 4 for him.
Yeah, four, I think.
Number
Yeah.
4, right? So I think he can have a great season this year and a much, much more earlier success than he
Hmm.
had last year.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he really blossomed as the year went on. Well, Yusuf, this has been a lot of fun talking to you. It's always great to talk to you.
You
Thank you
too.
for joining us. People can check out your recent articles on this issue in Florida and so many other things on firstandpen.com. Best of luck to you and have a great spring break.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it. Definitely. Thank you.